Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loko Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Samsaradava Nalalida Prapta Sakarana Gunana Vasya Vande Gurashi Charana Ravindam Prapta Sakarana Gunana Vasya Vande Gurashi Charana Vande Gurashi Charana Ravindam Vande Gurashi Charana Ravindam Vande Gurashi Charana Ravindam Mahaprabhu ki Tanalita Gita Vaditra Madhyam Manasura Sena Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nikita Parikramadya Manas Romanchakam Pasru Tarangavajo Vande Gurashi Charana Ravindam Romanchakam Pasru Tarangavajo Vande Gurashi Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shingaratanama Niramarjanado Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shingaratanama Juktasya Bhaktamsa Niyunjatopi Vande Gurashi Charana Ravindam Juktasya Bhaktamsa Niyunjatopi Vande Gurashi Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Satvana Truptan Hari Bhakta Sangha Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavate Sadhu Satvana Truptan Kridvaiva Truptim Vajata Shadeva Vande Gurashi Charana Ravindam Kridvaiva Shiradikama Dabayara Para Madhurya Leela Gunarupanamna Shiradikama Pratikshana Dhanalalupasya Vande Gurashi Charana Ravindam Ne kunjayunorati kelisidyai Jajali Virjukti Apekshaniya Nikunjayuno Tatrati daksha ativala vasya Bande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam. Sakchadhari Dvena Shamasta Shashre Ruktastathava Vyata Eva Sadhuvi. Kintu pravarja priya eva tasya Bande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam. Kintu pravarja priya eva tasya Bande Gurashi Charanara Yasya prasada Bhagavat prasado Yasya prasadam nagati kutapi. Yasya prasadam Dayam stubam tasya yasatri sandhyam Bande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam. Bande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam. Bande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Nama Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shanavadi Pachata Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Shri Chaitanya Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasari Ora Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Hariyaraye Namah Krishna Jadavaye Namah Hariyaraye Namah Jadavaye Madhavaya Kesavaye Namaha Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattaraguna Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhava Radha Nila Madhava Radhe Ayo Radha Jayo Jagannatha Jayo Baladeva Jayo Subhadrama Jayo Sudarshan Chakra Jayo Jagannatha Jayo Baladeva Subhadrama Jayo Sitaram Jayo Sitaram Sitaram Jayo Lakshman Hanuman Jayo Lakshmi Narasingha Jayo Lakshmi Narasingha Lakshmi Narasingha Jayo Prahlad Maharaj Nitai Gaura Haribo 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo Nitai Gaura Jai Vishnu Paraparamita Prabhajakacharya Sutra Sri Maharaj Divine Grace Abhajana Vina Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai इस्कॉन प्रतिष्ठा विधि समस्त कचर वैष्णव शिरोमणि पतित पावन शील प्रभुपाद जी महाराज की जय। श्री गौरी गुरु वर्गापतित उद्धार की जय। श्री रूप सनातन भक्त रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भक्त दास गुण सद्गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर जी की जय। अनंत गुरु वैष्णव वृंद की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। जय परम दयाल श्री नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय। जय प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जनाक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिदानंद स्मन गौरंग चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि महावृणावतार की जय। गोलोकेर प्रमधान हरिनाम संकीर्तन जग की जय। जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय। बृहद मृदंग ट्रांसलेंटल बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेवा की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ राधा कुंज श्याम कुंज गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय। श्री ब्रजभूमि वृंदावन मथुरा धाम की जय। दिलो शिव श्री राधा नील माधव की जय। श्री श्री मय पूर्णवद्वीप एक चक्रधाम की जय। जय परम करुण श्री गौर निताय की जय। श्री पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। श्री श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु श्रीमती सुभद्रा देवी सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय। सीताराम लक्ष्मण भक्त हनुमान जी की जय। भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशन कर सिंहरे भगवान की जय। जगंगा माई जमुना माई की जय। तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी भक्ति देवी की जय। श्री मथुरा रानी की जय। समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय। निताय गौर हरि प्रेमानंद हरि बोल। All glories to the assembled bodies. All glories to the assembled bodies. All glories to the assembled bodies. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Shri Guru Shri Gaur.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Dana dana dadayine.
Pralada
Hiranyakashipo Dakshaha.
Hiranyakashipu Dakshaha.
Shilatankaragaraye.
Silatankaragaraye.
Hito Narasimha Parato Narasimha.
Ito Nisimha Parato Nisimha.
Heto Yato Yamitato Narasimha.
Yato Yato Yamitato Nisimha.
Bahe Narasimha Hridaye Narasimha.
Bahir Nisimha Hridaye Nisimha.
Narasimha Vadim Sharanam Prapade.
Narasimhamadim Sharanam Prapade.
Tava Karakamala Varena Adhuta Shingam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanu Vrindam Keshavadeta Narahari Rupa Jagadish Hare Jaya Jagadish Hare Jaya Jagadish Hare.
Avakara Kamala Varenakam Adhuta Shingam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Danavinga Kesavadita Narari Rupa रे जय जगदीश रे जय जगदीश
केशव त्रेता नर हरि रूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे
जय केशव गीता नर हरि रूप जय जगदीश रे जय जगदीश रे जय जगदीश
जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह
जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह
जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज
जय प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद
निताय गौर हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल
निताय गौर हरि हरि निताय गौर जय श्री भक्ति पद सर्वविघ्न सिंह भगवान की जय भक्त श्रेष्ठ प्रहलाद महाराज की जय गौररी प्रमाण हरि हरि बोल श्री वृंदाई तुलसी बाई प्रिय ते सब सत्य विष्णु भक्ति पारे देवी शतवताय वृंदाई तुलसी बाई प्रिय ते सब सत्य विष्णु भक्ति पारे देवी सत्यवताय नमः वृंदाई तुलसी देवाई प्रिय के सब सत्य विष्णु भक्ति पारे देवी सत्यवताय नमः स्मृति तुलसी महारानी वृंदरी की जय
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्णा प्रेयसी नमो नमः
Radha Krishna Seva Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi
Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol
श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंदा देवी की जय।
Shri Vrindai Tulasi Vivai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavatai Namah Vrindai Tulasi Vivai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavatai Namah Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavatai Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai O Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you, his wishes fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make him a resident of Vrindavana. My desire is that you also give me a residence in pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Thus within my vision I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Kavitams of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own mad servant. This very fallen and lowly servant of Krishna praise. May I always swim in love with Shri Radha, Govinda Shrimati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishna Kam Ki Jai. Chaito Arpanam Vajanam Bhagavan Bhagavate Vrindavanam Shreyakar Vipachandika Vitaranam Vidya Vadujivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pradipadam Gunamita Swadanam Sarvatmasnam Param Param Jai Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Krishna conditioned life with repeated birth and death. His Sankirtan movement is the primary addiction for humanity at large. God is present to the addiction movement. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully test the nectar for which we always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings. I thus your hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested the word transcendental energies. There is not even hard and fast rules which in these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names. But I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, think you oneself lower than a strong street, but should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O my Lord, O Almighty Lord, O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want to cast the devotion service birth or to birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your generous servitor. Yes, some will rather and fall in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes will be decorated with tears without flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up? And will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? I don't know when the Krishna is my Lord. O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant anywhere in your absence. I don't know when the Krishna is my Lord, and it should remain so.
By his grace, makes me broken heart not be present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is my worshipful Lord unconditionally.
Anything offenses in our chanting within the Lord that should be avoided, there are as follows. One, two, to consider names of the gods. The Lord Shiva and Brahma to be equal to or independent of the Lord Vishnu. Three, this way the orders of the spiritual master. Four, lastly, invite the Lord to our Lord to the sons of liberation. Five, most of the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to the imagination. Six, give some interpretation of the holy name of the Lord. Seven, to commit sinful activities and strength to chant the holy name of the Lord. Eight, this is chanting Hare Krishna, one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which offer greater spiritual activity, karma kanda. 9, instruct the faithless person about the glories of the holy name. And 10, to not have complete faith, chanting the holy names, and maintain material attachments, even if understanding so many instructions in this matter. It also understands the intent while chanting. Everybody claims to must
Carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success, Krishna Prema. Now, let us offer a most humble obeisance unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees that can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Vanchakalpatarabhyascha, kripa sindhubhyevacha, patitanam pavanebhyo, vaishnavebhyo, namo namaha, Vaishnava Thakur ki jai, namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Tinamani Namaste Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavad, Bhaskat Yedisitarni, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasati Gaurabhata, Srimad Bhagavatam Ram Kantaraja ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Janmadyasya yato nivayad itaratas chartesva vigyaswarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Dikavaye Muyanti Yatsuraya Tejo Varimidam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Misha Damna Svena Sadanirastakuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi. O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Sri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes, of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen in fire or land seen in water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reaction to the three modes of nature, appear factual although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Dharma projita kaitravota paramo nimatsaranam satam vedyam vastavam atra vastu shivadam tapa trayon mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim Vaparir Ishvaraha Sadyor Hidi Avarudite Tra Kriti Behisususabhistakshana. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam sukhamukad amrita dravya samyatam pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam muhur aho raska bhuvibhavakaha. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful. Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Shinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hidyantak Stohi Bhadrani Vidunati Suhitsatam. To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures, or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita, is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best wishing friend and purifies a devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him. Nasta presu bhadresu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati utamasloke bhaktir bhavati naistaki. In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. Tadarajastamo bhava kamalobhadayaschi cheta itara navidam stitvam sattve prasidati. By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lust and avarice are diminished. Evam prasana manaso bhagavat bhakti yogataha bhagavat tattva vijnanam mukta sangasya jayate. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness. becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly. Vidyate hridaya grantis, chidyante sarvasamsaya, shiyante jasya karmani, drista evat manishvare. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the heart not of material affection and enables one at once to come to the stage of a samsayam samagram, understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth, Personality of Godhead. Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness can one understand the science of Krishna. Shri Guru Vastika prayers ki jai. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on the fire's fire to extinguish it. So, the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. I, for my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is an ocean of auspicious qualities. Chanting the holy name, dancing with ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments. The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind. Sometimes his hair stands on end. He feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Sri Radha and Krishna. He also engages his disciples in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform other similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food. Analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasad, he is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava. And their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. This spiritual master is very dear because he is expert at assisting the gopis who at different times make different tastes and arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavan. I offer my most humble obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servitor of the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master. At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master. Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Anadiradi Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. Chantamani Prakara Satma Sukalpa Vriksha Laksavrite Susurabhira Vipaliantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambrahma Sevyamanam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kvananta Aravinda Dalaytaksham Bharhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandar Prakoti Kamaniya Visesa Sobham Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kalasad Vanamaya Vansi Ratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Tribangalalitam Nita Prakasam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Angyani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyantam Tam Jagats Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vede Sudurlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastu Koti Satavatsara Sampragamyo Vayoratapi Manaso Munipungamanam Sobhyasti Yat Prapadasim Yavichintya Tatve Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chayitam Jagadanda Kotim Yat Shaktirasti Jagadanda Chaya Yadanta Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Bhava Bhavita Diyo Manajasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusa Suktaryameva Nigama Pratitaistuvanti Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavitabis Tabirya Eva Nijarupa Tayakalavi Goloka Eva Nivasata Kilatma Bhuto Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santak Sadaiva Hidayesu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Rama Adi Murti Sukhalani Amenatistan Nana Avatara Makarod Bhuvane Sukintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavad Paramam Pumam Yo Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yasya Prabha Prabhavato Jagadanda Koti Koti Svasesu Vasudari Vibhuti Binam Tad Brahma Niskalam Anantam Asesa Bhutam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Maya Hiyasya Jagananda Satani Sute Taigunya Tad Visaya Veda Vitayamanam Sattva Valambi Parasattvam Visuddha Sattvam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Mataya Manasu Ya Praninam Pratifalam Smaratam Upetya Lilayatena Bhuvanani Jayat Jayatram Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Golokanamni Nijadamni Talechatasya Devi Mahesa Haridama Sute Sutesu Te Prabhavani Jaya Vitasya Te Prabhavani Jaya Vitasya Yena Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Shististati Pralaya Sadhava Saktireka Jayeva Yasya Bhavanani Vibharti Durga Itchana Rupam Apiyasya Chachesta Tesa Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Shiram Yata Dadi Vikara Visesa Yoga Sanjayate Nahitata Pritakasti Hetoho Yasambutam Apitata Samapaiti Karya Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Departure Evhita Santanam Abhyapetya Dipayate Vivita Hetu Samanu Dharma Yastadvageva Hicha Vishnu Taya Vibhati Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yakarna Narna Vajale Vajatisma Yoga Nidram Ananta Jagananda Saroma Kupaha Adhara Shaktim Avalambya Param Swamurtim Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yasyaika Nisvasita Kala Matavalambya Tiloma Vilaja Jagananda Jivanti Loma Vilaja Jagananda Nataha Vishnur Mahansahi Yasya Kala Vishesho Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Basvam Yatasma Sakalesu Nijesu Tejaha Swiyam Kiyat Prakatayat Apitadvatatra Brahmaya Esa Jagananda Vidana Karta Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Pada Palavyugam Vinidaya Kumbha Dvande Pranama Samayesu Kanadi Rajaha Vignam Vihantam Alamasya Jagatchayasya Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Agnir Mahi Gaganam Ambumaruddhisascha Kalastatatma Manasitti Jagatchayani Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Vishanti Yamcha Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yaschaksuresa Savita Sakalagrahanam Raja Samasta Suramurti Rasesa Tejaha Yasya Gaya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakro Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Dharmo Tapapa Nichaya Srutayastapamsi Brahma Dikita Patagavatayasta Jivaha Yadata Matra Vibhava Prakata Prabhava Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yastrindra Gopam Avtavendra Mahoswakarma Bandhana Rupa Falabhajana Matanoti Karmani Nirdahati Kintu Chabakti Bhajam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yam Kroda Kama Sahaja Pranayadi Vitti Vatsalya Moha Guru Gora Vasevya Bhavai Sanchitya Tasya Sadrisim Tanamapurete Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Shriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpatarvo Dhuma Bhumis Chintamani Ganam Hayitoyam Amritam Kata Ganam Natyam Gamanam Apivamsi Priyasaki Chid Anandam Jyotiparam Apitad Aswadyam Apija Sayatra Shiradi Bihi Shabati Shirabi Byascha Sumahan Nime Sardakyuva Rajati Nahiyatrapi Samaya Bhaje Svidad Vipam Tamaham Iha Golokamitiyam Vedantaste Santakshiti Viralachara Katipaye Shri Ishopanishad ki jai. Om Purnam Ada Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Ishavaishamidam Sarvam Jatkinja Jagatyam Jagatina Taktena Bunjitaha Magridaha Kasisviddanam Purvani Vaha Karmani Jajiva Chekchatam Samaha Evam Twayi Nanyatetusti Nakarma Lipite Nare Asuya Namate Loka Andena Tamasavritaha Tamste Pratya Bhikichanti Yeki Chatmahano Janaha Anujad Ekamanaso Javio Naina Devam Apavam Pavam Asat Tad Davato Nyana Teti Tistat Tasmin Apumata Visvadadati. Tad ejati tad nejati tad dure tad vantike tad antarasya sarvasya stadu sarvasya syabayataha. Yastu sarvani bhutani atmani evanupashyati sarvabhutesu jatmanam tatuna vijigapsate. Asmin sarvani bhutani atmeva bhut vijanataha tatra ko maha kaha soka ekadvam anupasyataha. Saprayagaschukamakayam avrinam asnaviram sudam apapavidam karir marisi paribu swayambhu yatatat yaturutan vyadadach chasvatipyaha samabhyaha. Andam tamaha pravisanti ye vidyam upasyate tato bhuya vite tamo ya yuvidyam rataha. Anyadevahur vidyaya anyadahur vidyaya iti susrumadhiranam yenastad vichachakshire. Vidyam chavidyam chayas yastad vilubayam saha avidyaya militum tirtva vidyayam ritamasnute. Andham tamaha pravisanti e sambhutim upasyate tato bhuya vite tamo yayu sambhutam rataha. Anyad evaha sambhavat anyadahura sambhavat iti susrumadim ramam sambhutam ritamasnute. Hiranmayana patrena satyasya piyatam mukam tatpam pusam apavrinu satyadharma yadristaye. Pusane kaseyama surya prajapatya vyuha rasmin samahatejo yate rupam kalyanatamam tate pasyami yo savaso purushaha sohamasmi.
Inanmayena patrina satya vihitam muktam tatvam pusham apavrinam satyam tanmaya tustati.
Vayuranilam amritam etedam basmantam sariram om kratu smara kritam smara kratu smara kritam smara. Oh, I'm sorry. Pusaneka seyamastrya prajapatya vyuharasmin samahatejo yate rupam kalyanatamam tate pasyami yo savaso purushaha sohamasmi. Vayuranilam amritam atedam basmantam sariram om kratu smara kritam smara kratu smara kritam smara.
Vayuranilam amritam atedam basmadam shariram om kratu smara krita smara kratu smara kritam smara.
Agnena supatara asman vishwani deva vayunani vidvan yod asma churana minmo bhuyastam te nama uktim vidama om tatsat. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantharaja Ki Jai. We're going to continue now one more time on this verse, and I'll just read the verse, quote the verse and the translation, but we'll skip the purport and go directly into the class. Traipista poru bayaha sanashingarupam Kritva Brahmad Brukutitam Strakarala Vaktram Dayendramasu Gadaya Vipatantam Arad Uro Nipatya Vidadara Naktai Spuranantam. Translation: the personality Godhead assumed the incarnation of Nrsingadeva in order to vanquish the great fears of the demigods. He killed the king of the demons, Hiranyakashipu, who challenged the Lord with a club in his hand by placing the demon on his thighs and piercing him with his nails, rolling his eyebrows in anger and showing his fearful teeth and mouth. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So there are a whole bunch of points I want to make from the pastime of Prahlad Maharaj. So yesterday we began to speak about how Prahlad Maharaj meets this great devotee who is acting like a python, sitting in one place, and he seems to be very overweight or fat, and waiting for some prey to come by so he can eat it. But Prahlad Maharaj recognizes that he's not some ordinary person or some strange freak. He realizes that he's a very exalted devotee. And he begins to question him. He wants to know why he's so fat, and he also wants to know why he's just sitting there and not moving. And above all, he wants to question him about the truth about life. So the sage begins to speak, and he says, the saintly Brahmana said, "O best of the Asuras, Prahlad Maharaj, who are recognized by advanced and civilized men, you are aware of the different stages of life because of your inherent transcendental eyes with which you can see a man's character and thus know clearly the results of acceptance and rejection of things as they are. In the purport, Prabhupada says, a pure devotee like Prahlad Maharaj can understand the minds of others because of his pure vision in devotional service. A devotee, like Prahlad Maharaj, can study another man's character without difficulty. And then the next verse, this is 7:13:21. Now the next verse, 7:13:22. The sage continues, the Brahmana, saintly Brahmana continues to speak. He says, Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is full of all opulences, is predominant within the core of your heart. Because of your being a pure devotee, he always drives away all darkness of ignorance as the sun drives away the darkness of the universe. So in the purport, Prabhupada writes, the words Bhaktya Kevalaya indicate that simply by executing devotional service, one can become full of all knowledge. Krishna is the master of all knowledge. Aishwaryasya, Samagrasya, Virasya, Yashasasriya. The Lord is situated in everyone's heart. Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hirdese Rijuna Tistati. And when the Lord is pleased with a devotee, the Lord instructs him. Only to the devotees, however, does the Lord give instructions by which to advance further and further in devotional service. To others, the non-devotees, the Lord gives instructions according to the manner of their surrender. The pure devotee is described by the words Bhaktya Kevalaya. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that Bhaktya Kevalaya means Jnana Karmadinam Amishraya, unmixed with fruitive activities or speculative knowledge. Simply surrendering at the lotus feet is the cause of all a devotee's enlightenment and awareness. So here we see that complete surrender to Krishna is necessary in order to have not only the protection of the Lord, but also to be illuminated with transcendental knowledge. So, and it's only to such devotees who are completely surrendered that the Lord gives instructions by which to advance further and further in devotional service. To the non-devotees, the Lord gives instructions according to the manner of their surrender. So there is a verse in it. Chaturvida bhajante jana sukrtina rijana artha jigyasu artarti gyanicha paratarsava. There are 4 types of people that surrender unto the Lord. 1 is the person who's in distress. 2 is the person who's seeking wealth. 3 is the person who's curious. And 4th is the person who's really serious about understanding the absolute truth. So for the first 3, that you can say there's a manner of their surrender. So if they're surrendering but with conditions, then the Lord instructs them accordingly. But if they surrender completely with no conditions, then the Lord takes personal care of that devotee. I mean, all 4 are devotees in the sense that they're approaching the Lord. The first 3 have a strong material, let's say, purpose. The 4th one has a purpose also, that is to acquire real knowledge of the Lord. But the Lord favors that person especially because they're ready to surrender completely with no conditions. And the more they learn about the Lord, the more they surrender. The others also can progressively make advancement if they are instructed properly by a bona fide spiritual master. So one example I'll give you is many, many years ago, long time ago, when I first joined the movement, And right away they made me a temple president. Of course, there was no temple. But there were a few devotees. So anyway, this one devotee wanted to get initiated with his wife. And I told him, you write a letter to Prabhupada, but show it to me before you send it. He said, okay. So he writes a letter. And I looked at the letter. I said, you can't send this letter. He said, why? I said, because if you send this letter, then Prabhupada will know that I'm not teaching you Krishna consciousness properly. He said, well, what's wrong with this letter? Well, you're saying in the letter that your goal in life is to be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. I said, if you write that, then Prabhupada will know that I haven't instructed you properly. He said, I don't understand it says that in the books also, that we should desire to be liberated from birth and death. I said, it says that in the books, but Lord Chaitanya says, Nadanam, Najanam, Sundaram, Kavitam Vaja, Girishikame, Mamavatman, Nivartante. It says that I don't want any amount of wealth, Nadanam, Najanam, I don't want any number of followers or children or anything like that. Nasundaram, I don't want to have any beautiful women or any sense gratification. Nasundaram, Mamavart, Manavart, Te, Manusya, Sarab. He says, and I don't want to be liberated from birth and death. I simply want your devotional service. I said, this supersedes any other statement that's made. The pure devotee doesn't even want liberation. And so he had to rewrite the letter, and Prabhupada accepted him. So therefore, we have to be very careful about what our motive is. If we have no motive, personal motive, other than to completely surrender to the Lord and follow the Lord's instructions sincerely, then Krishna takes special care of the devotee. So, Nadanam, Najanam, Nasundarim, Kavitam Vaja, Girishikame, Mamavart, Vartante, Manusya, Parthasarvasaha. So, therefore it says, simply surrendering at the lotus feet of the Lord is the cause of all a devotee's enlightenment and awareness. So, we should be satisfied by knowledge and realization that gives us a chance to advance very, very quickly in devotional service. So the next verse, the saintly Brahmana says, my dear king, although you know everything, you have posed some questions, which I shall try to answer according to what I have learned by hearing from authorities. I cannot remain silent. Notice it doesn't say what I have learned by reading books. It says what I have learned by hearing from authorities. I cannot remain silent in this regard, for a personality like you is just fit to be spoken to by one who desires self-purification. So this proves that the person acting as a disciple must be qualified to hear. You see, being qualified to hear is a big thing, because it means one is eager, one is very, very eager to hear and chant the glories of the Lord, much more than anything else. And this is explained also in a very nice verse, which says, let's see where that verse is. Well, it says, Utsaha nischayat daryat tatat karma pravartanat sangatyagat sato vrite sadbir bhakti prasidati. There are 6 principles favorable to the execution of pure devotional service. Being enthusiastic, endeavoring with confidence, being patient, acting according to regulative principles such as Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, in other words, hearing, chanting, and remembering Krishna, abandoning the association of non-devotees, and following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. These 6 principles undoubtedly assure the complete success of pure devotional service. So when it says following in the footsteps of previous acharyas, that means whatever the previous acharya did not do, we should not do. And whatever the previous acharya did do, that's what we should do. Right? Now also, it says that one should be very, let's say, well, when it says here that be very enthusiastic, enthusiasm. So that means that one is deriving pleasure through Krishna, through transcendental activities in Krishna consciousness. One is not seeking to be pleasured by sense gratification. So this enthusiasm comes when one gets this higher taste of hearing and chanting, and going through the whole process of self-realization every day, learning more and more every day. This makes someone very enthusiastic. So then, next he says, a saintly person doesn't wish to speak to anyone and everyone, and he is therefore grave and silent. Generally, a common man does not need to be advised. Unless one is prepared to take instructions, it is said that a saintly person should not address him. Although sometimes, because of great kindness, a saintly person speaks to ordinary men. As for Prahlad Maharaj, however, since he was not a common ordinary man, whatever questions he posed would have to be answered, even by a great and exalted personality. Therefore, the saintly Brahmana did not remain silent, but began to answer. These answers, however, were not concocted by him. This is indicated by the words yata shrutam, meaning, as I have heard from the authorities. In the parampara system, when the questions are bona fide and answered, when the questions are bona fide, the answers are bona fide. No one should attempt to create or manufacture answers. One must refer to the Shastras and give answers according to Vedic understanding. The words yata shrutam refer to Vedic knowledge. The Vedas are known as Shruti because this knowledge is received from authorities. The statements of the Vedas are known as Shruti Pramana. One should quote evidence from the Shruti, the Vedas, or the Vedic literature, and then one's statements will be correct. Otherwise, one's words will proceed from mental concoction. So we see how important it is that when a person is giving a lecture, they should not give any personal opinions. They should speak from Shastra. So then the next verse says, because of insatiable material desires, I was being carried away by the waves of material nature's laws. And thus I was engaging in different activities, struggling for existence in various forms of life. This is a description of normal people in the material world. They are all struggling, trying to have sense gratification and being frustrated in not getting all the sense gratification that they want. So, then the next verse, it says, in the course of the evolutionary process, which is caused by fruitive activities due to undesirable material sense gratification, I have received this human form of life, which can lead to the heavenly planets, to liberation, to the lower species, or to rebirth among human beings. So he's explaining now, again, what usually happens, even when people come to human form of life, they engage in demigod worship, they do Satyanarayana pujas and things like that, all kinds of so quasi-spiritual activities, but for material advancement and in sense gratification. And they can go up and down in the material world. Then in the next verse he says, in this human form of life, a man and woman unite for the sensual pleasure of sex. But by actual experience we have observed that none of them are happy. Therefore, seeing the contrary results, I have stopped taking part in materialistic activities. So, in other words, he is explaining the truth here, that people get married or people hook up, as they say, and engage in sense gratification, but they're never really satisfied. Yeah, there seems to be some satisfaction at one point, but then there's it gradually turns into dissatisfaction over time. So these are all realizations by this saintly Brahmana. And then he says, the actual form of life for living entities is one of spiritual happiness, which is real happiness. This happiness can be achieved only when one stops all materialistic activities. Material sense enjoyment is simply imagination. Therefore, considering this subject matter, I have ceased from all material activities, and I am lying down here. So now he's explained why he's just sitting in one place, not moving anywhere, right? And we read this purport yesterday. This explains the difference between the Mayavadis and the Vaishnavas. The Mayavadi wants to reject everything, and the Vaishnava wants to do everything to please Krishna. The Mayavadi philosophers, therefore, adhering to the slogan Brahma Satyam Jagan Mitya, want to refrain from false materialistic activities. They want to stop all activities and merge in the Supreme Brahman. According to the Vaishnava philosophy, however, if one simply ceases from materialistic activities, one cannot remain inactive for very long, and therefore everyone should engage himself in spiritual activities which will solve the problem of suffering in this material world. So that is our philosophy right there. So then, he says, in this way the conditioned soul living within the body forgets his self-interest because he identifies himself with the body. Because the body is material, his natural tendency is to be attracted by the varieties of the material world. Thus the living entity suffers the miseries of material existence. So, yeah, everyone is trying to be happy, Prabhupada says, because, as explained in the previous verse, Sukham asyat mano rupam sarve ho paratis tanu. When the living entity is in his original spiritual form, he is happy by nature. There is no question of miseries for the spiritual being. As Krishna is always happy, the living entities, who are his parts and parcels, are also happy by nature. But because of being put within the material world and forgetting their eternal relationship with Krishna, they have forgotten their real nature, which is to be happy, right? Because every one of us is a part of Krishna. We have a very affectionate relationship with him. But because we have forgotten our identities and are considering the body to be the self, we are afflicted by all the troubles of birth, death, old age, and disease. This misconception in materialistic life continues unless and until one comes to understand his relationship with Krishna. This happiness sought by the conditioned soul is certainly only illusion, as explained in the next verse. So we see how most people are tricked by Maya, and they identify with the body. They're tricked, Maya in the form of parents, Maya in the form of teachers, mundane teachers, Maya in the form of philosophers, Maya in the form of scientists, Maya in the form of all kinds of so-called authorities who are actually not authorities, but they are just nonsense people spewing out a bunch of speculation based on sense gratification, identification with the body, identification with the color of the body, identification with all kinds of material things. And then the next verse says, just as a deer, because of ignorance, cannot see the water within a well covered by grass, but runs after water elsewhere, the living entity, covered by the material body, does not see the happiness within himself, but runs after after happiness in the material world. Well, this is an echo of 5th chapter, 22nd verse, which says, and it's an amazing verse that I've always looked at with marvel. And it says, 5th chapter, 24th verse. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the supreme, and ultimately he attains the supreme. So this is an amazing verse, because most people, in fact all people almost, look for happiness without. Without means outside of themselves. They go to amusement parks, they go to Waterland, they go to casinos, they go vacation in like Florida, or they go to Hawaii. They're always going somewhere to find happiness. They go to the bar, they go to the club. Like right near the farm, there's this building next to the gas station, and it's the Eagles Club, or some kind of club, And every night people go there, and what do? They just drink. They drink liquor and they talk nonsense. And they have cars every night. And they have to pay for the liquor, and they have to be careful not to get too drunk, otherwise they can have an accident when they're going home. And the whole thing is crazy. They go night after night. And I always see a whole bunch of cars there at night. It's closed during the day. And it's complete nonsense, right? But yet, and they're killing themselves by doing it, by drinking all that alcohol. So you don't have to go outside of yourself to find happiness. You have to go inside yourself, because Krishna is in the heart. So Prabhupada says, this is an accurate example depicting how the living entity, because of lack of knowledge, runs after happiness outside his own self. When one understands his real identity as a spiritual being, he can understand the supreme spiritual being, Krishna, and the real happiness exchanged between Krishna and oneself. It is very interesting to note how this verse points to the body's growth from the spirit soul. The modern materialistic scientist thinks that life grows from matter, but actually the fact is that matter grows from life. So see, right there is a huge fundamental mistake that kids are being taught in schools. They're being taught that life comes from matter. But the fact is that matter is produced from life. Life comes from life. It doesn't come from dead matter. See? So right there is a fundamental misconception that is pounded into the brain of little kids right through college. And then they go with that, they run with that the rest of their life. That life comes from matter, not from life. See? The modern materialistic scientist thinks that life grows from matter, but actually the fact is that the matter grows from life. The life, or the spiritual soul, is compared herein to water, from which clumps of matter grow in the form of grass. One who is ignorant of scientific knowledge of the spirit soul does not look inside the body to find happiness in the soul. Instead, he goes outside to search for happiness. Just as the deer, without knowledge of the water beneath the grass, goes out to the desert to find water, the Krishna consciousness movement is trying to remove the ignorance of misled human beings who are trying to find water outside the jurisdiction of life. Rasoham apsukonteya, the taste of water is Krishna. To quench one's thirst, one must taste water by association with Krishna. This is the Vedic injunction. Well, so this verse says in the Bhagavad Gita, 5th chapter, 24th verse, one whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the supreme, and ultimately he attains the supreme. So Prabhupada writes, unless one is able to relish happiness from within, how can one retire from the external engagements meant for deriving superficial happiness? So instead of going to the Eagles Club to drink alcohol and talk nonsense, one should come to the temple, right? And chant Hare Krishna and dance and have prasadam and then hear the class. Then one begins to make progressive spiritual advancement. But if you go outside to the birthday party and the waterland and to the casino and all these different places, seeking happiness, you're not going to really find it. It's a false type of happiness, and it ends up in misery. And what begins like nectar and ends up in misery is happiness under the mode of passion. Okay, so a liberated person enjoys happiness by factual experience. He can therefore sit silently at any place and enjoy the activities of life from within. Such a liberated person no longer desires external material happiness. This state is called Brahmabhuta, attaining which one is assured of going back to Godhead, back to home. Okay, now it continues where the great sage says, the living entity tries to achieve happiness and rid himself of the causes of distress, but because the various bodies of the living entities are under the full control of material nature, all his plans in different bodies, one after another, are ultimately baffled. So that's the truth. And then it says, materialistic activities are always mixed with three kinds of miserable conditions, adhyatmika, adhidevika, and adhibodhika. Therefore, even if one achieves some success by performing such activities, what is the benefit of this success? One is still subjected to birth, death, old age, disease, and the reactions of his fruitive activities. Then Prabhupada writes, according to the materialistic way of life, if a poor man, after laboring very, very hard, gets some material profit at the end of his life, he is considered a success, even though he again dies while suffering the threefold miseries, adhyatmika, adhidaivika, and adhibodhika. No one can escape the threefold miseries of materialistic life, namely miseries pertaining to the body and mind, miseries pertaining to the difficulties imposed by society, community, nation, and other living entities, and miseries inflicted upon us by natural disturbances from earthquakes, famines, droughts, floods, epidemics, and so on. If one works very hard, suffering the threefold miseries, and then is successful in getting some small benefit, what is the value of this benefit? Besides that, even if a karmi is successful in accumulating some material wealth, he still cannot enjoy it, for he must die in bereavement. I have even seen a dying man begging a medical attendant to increase his life by 4 years so that he could complete his material plans. Of course, the medical man was unsuccessful in expanding the life of the man, who therefore died in great bereavement. Everyone must die in this way, and after one's mental condition is taken into account by the laws of material nature, he is given another chance to fulfill his desires in a different body. Material plans for material happiness have no value, but under the spell of the illusory energy, we consider them extremely valuable. There were many politicians, social reformers, and philosophers who died very miserably without deriving any practical value from their material plans. Therefore, a sane and sensible man never desires to work hard under the conditions of threefold miseries, only to die in disappointment. Wow. So this is the truth of life. So there's one other point I want to make, and this is in the Canto 7, Chapter 10, verse number 8. And it says, O my Lord, because of lusty desires from the very beginning of one's birth, the functions of one's senses, mind, life, body, religion, patience, intelligence, shyness, opulence, strength, memory, and truthfulness are vanquished. And the purport, in other words, basically this verse is saying, as long as we have material desires, everything we do will be a failure. And not only that, everything we think, we plan, we study will be contaminated, and nothing pure will come out of it. It will always be not only a failure, but it'll be going in the wrong direction. So as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Kaman Hrid Rogam, materialistic life means that one is afflicted by a formidable disease called lusty desire. Liberation means freedom from lusty desires, because it is only due to such desires that one must accept repeated birth and death. As long as one's lusty desires are unfulfilled, one must take birth after birth to fulfill them. Because of material desires, therefore, one performs various types of activities and receives various types of bodies with which to try to fulfill desires that are never satisfied. The only remedy is to take the devotional service, which begins when one is free from all material desires. Anya Abhilasita Sunyam. Anya Abhilasita means material desires, and Sunyam means free from. In other words, even one material desire is enough to corrupt everything one does and make mistakes of perception and make mistakes of all kinds of mistakes. Just one material desire. What if you have many material desires, which is the case for most people? The spiritual soul has spiritual activities and spiritual desires, as described by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Mama janmani janmani sure bhavatat bhakti rahaitaki tvai. Unalloyed devotion to the service of the Lord is the only spiritual desire. To fulfill this spiritual desire, however, one must be free from all material desires. Desirelessness means freedom from material desires. This is described by Srila Rupa Goswami as Anya Bilasita Sunyam. As soon as one has material desires, one loses his spiritual identity. Then all the paraphernalia in one's life, including one's senses, body, religion, patience, and intelligence, are deviated from one's original Krishna consciousness. As soon as one has material desires, one cannot properly use his senses, intelligence, mind, and so on for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mayavadi philosophers want to become impersonal, senseless, and mindless, but that is not possible. The living entity must be living, always existing with desires, ambitions, and so on. These should be purified, however, so that one can desire spiritually and be spiritually ambitious without material contamination. In every living entity, these propensities exist because he is a living entity. When materially contaminated, however, one is put into the hands of material misery, janma mrityu jara vyadi. If one wants to stop repeated birth and death, one must take to the devotional service of the Lord. Sarvapadi vimer bhuktam tatparatvena nirmalam hishikesha sevanam bhaktir uchyate. Bhakti, or devotional service, means engaging all our senses in the service of the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Master of all the senses. When the spirit soul renders service unto the Supreme, there are two side effects. One is freed from all material designations, and simply by being employed in the service of the Lord, one's senses are purified. So this is the great sage who is instructing Prahlad Maharaj in Atma Tattva, the science of the soul, and its relationship to Krishna. So this is the purpose of human life, is to hear this and assimilate it and follow it. So when Prahlad Maharaj speaks to his father, and then his father's trying to kill him, and then later on he's saved by Lord Nrsingadev. Lord Nrsingadev is very pleased by Prahlad and asks him to make any request he wants, and the Lord will satisfy it. But Prahlad Maharaj says, "O my Lord, I am your unmotivated servant, and you are my eternal master. There's no need of our being anything other than master and servant. You are naturally my master, and I'm naturally your servant. We have no other relationship." And then he says, "O my Lord, when a human being is able to give up all the material desires in his mind, he becomes eligible to possess wealth and opulence like yours." So, Prabhupada writes, atheistic men sometimes criticize a devotee by saying, if you do not want to take any benediction from the Lord, meaning a material benediction, and if the servant of the Lord is as opulent as the Lord himself, why do you ask for the benediction of being engaged as the Lord's servant? Sridhar Swami comments, Bhagavatvaya Bhagavat Samam Aishwaryaya Bhagavat Vata. Becoming as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead does not mean becoming one with him or equal to him, although in the spiritual world the servant is equally as opulent as the master. The servant of the Lord is engaged in the service of the Lord as a servant, friend, father, mother, or a conjugal lover, all of whom are equally as opulent as the Lord. This is achintya Veda abheda tattva. The master and servant are different, yet equal in opulence. This is the meaning of simultaneous difference from the Supreme Lord and oneness with him. So all the pure devotees of the Lord have, at the same time, all the opulences of the Lord, but they are still the servant, and the Lord is the master. And they can never be equal to the Lord in all respects, but they can share many of the opulences of the Lord. So Prahlad's point is that he doesn't want any material desire from the Lord. And what does he want? The only thing he wants is to be purified of material desires. That's his only desire. And he says this he says, let me see where he says it. So it says that Prahlad Maharaj was only a boy. When he heard the benedictions offered by the Lord, Nrsingadev, he considered them impediments on the path of devotional service. Thus he smiled very mildly and spoke as follows. And he says, in other words, he's not interested in all the things the Lord offered him. He says, "My dear Lord, I was born in an atheistic family. I am naturally attached to material enjoyment. Therefore, kindly do not tempt me with these illusions. I am very much afraid of material conditions, and I desire to be liberated from materialistic life. It is for this reason that I have taken shelter of your lotus feet. O my worshipful Lord, because the seed of lusty desires, which is the root cause of material existence, is within the core of everyone's heart, you have sent me to this material world to exhibit the symptoms of a pure devotee. Otherwise, O my Lord, O supreme instructor of the entire world, you are so kind to your devotee that you could not induce him to do something unbeneficial for him. On the other hand, one who desires some material benefit in exchange for devotional service cannot be your pure devotee. Indeed, he is no better than a merchant who wants profit in exchange for service. A servant who desires material profits from his master is certainly not a qualified servant or pure devotee. Similarly, a master who bestows benedictions upon his servant because of a desire to maintain a prestigious position as master is also not a pure master. O my Lord, I am your unmotivated servant, and you are my eternal master. There's no need of our being anything other than master and servant. You are naturally my master, and I am naturally your servant. We have no other relationship. And then he says, O my Lord, best of the givers of benediction, if you at all want to bestow a desirable benediction upon me, then I pray from your Lordship that within the core of my heart there will be no material desires. There it is. No material desires. That's what he wants. And this is the verse, Nadanam Najanam Nasundaram Kavitam Va Jagadishikame Mama Janmani Janmanishwari Bhavatad Bhaktira Haitaki Twayi. O my Lord, I do not want from you any amount of wealth, nor many followers, nor a beautiful wife, for these are all materialistic desires. But if I have to ask you for any benediction, I pray that in whatever forms of life I may take my birth under any circumstances, I will not be bereft of your transcendental devotional service. So that's the meaning of this verse by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Devotees are always on the positive platform in contrast to the Mayavadis who want to make everything impersonal or void. One cannot remain void, sunyavadi. Rather, one must possess something. Therefore, the devotee on the positive side wants to possess something. And this possession is very nicely described by Prahlad Maharaj, who says, if I must take some benediction from you, I pray that within the core of my heart there may be no material desires. The desire to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not at all material. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So we should pray to Krishna every day. Please keep me engaged in your service. And please bless me not to have any material desires other than the pure desire to always serve you. Hari Bol. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma Pandomui Sahavadana Mate Janara prasadevai ebhavatori ajay Krishna prapti hoya hoite Shri Guru Charane Rati Ese Utamagati Ye Prasade Pure Sama Asa Guru Mukha Padma Vaikya Chitete Koriya Aikya Arana Koriya Mane Asa Shri Guru Charane Rati Ese Utamagati e pasade pure sarva asa. चक्षुदान दिलजे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान प्रकाशित श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदान जनर बंधु Lokena lokera jivana Ha ha Prabhu kora doya de amore padachaya Ebeyas kusekti bhuvana Ebeyas kusukji bhuvana Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Rama Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesa Sunyavadi Paskadya Desatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavani Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pararaja Gachasta Tarasatara Shri Shrimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktivinda Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Sam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Ki Jai. Jamuna Maya Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinda Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guru, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavana Ki Jai. The lotus feet of our spiritual master, the way by which we contain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great honor and reverence. By his grace, I can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection and fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth and birth. Emanates by him, ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor and Lord and master of devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.